to ask you is how you get to the magic number of 15% and why 15% is the magic number.
Well, the Presidential Debate Commission has said that you have to be at 15% in the polls to be in the presidential debates. Last week, I heard somebody say that the audience for the first presidential debate is projected to be more audience than the Super Bowl. Well, important. Look, both myself and Bill Weld, we would not be doing this if we didn't have the opportunity to actually win. But to win, we've got to be in that big game.
And so how do you get that number up? And what can you do to manage to get a poll to 15%?
Well, I think right now the issue is that the polling companies are doing Trump and Clinton. That's what they're doing. And then about 40% of the polls, maybe a couple questions down, what happens when you add Johnson to this mix? And right now, 12, 13%. It needs to be a question asked Trump, Johnson, Clinton right from the start. I think that in and of itself, that we'd be at 20%. And then the media also, 99% of the media just reports the top line. So for the most part, people in this country do not know that there are choices, in this case, Johnson-Weld, beyond Clinton and Trump.
Well, let's talk about some of the choices beyond the politics, which of course we're all fascinated with the politics. The policy of a Johnson-Weld administration intrigues me. Like, how does President Gary Johnson stop ISIS? I know you're not a big fan of foreign involvement of troops. I believe you're not a big fan of drone attacks. How do you fight ISIS?
Well, let me start off by saying, Paul, maybe you saw this poll among active military personnel that came out about 4 days ago. Who do you favor for President of the United States? 39% Johnson, 31% Trump, 20% Clinton. So how do you address ISIS? Well, we are at war with ISIS, but think of ISIS as sands through an hourglass. I mean, their days are done. They are regionally contained, and we're gonna do them in. But their propaganda, the fact that people want to join them, has to do with the attention that they have garnered. And, of course, you have these terrorist acts that are apart from the actual regional activity of ISIS. We've got to be alert to this. We're at war with this. Look, we're going to be as smart about this as anybody.
But does that mean that you'd be willing to send troops to Syria if you need to fight some of these?
I don't think, no. I don't think sending troops is the answer. If it's a regional issue, if it's a matter of sending troops that are in fact going to just engage ISIS, that's a whole nother situation. Never say never. Right. As President of the United States, look, you gauge these, if you want to call them opportunities. If there's an opportunity to go in and take on 2,000 ISIS members,
maybe you do it.
Maybe you do that. Yes.
And what about the online radicalization that's happening here in the United States? It's become an increasing concern. Do you believe that law enforcement should be more active in policing online activity to prevent the radicalization of Americans? Well,
I point to Mateen, the shooting that occurred in Orlando, and the fact that the FBI interviewed this guy 3 times. Now, he was allowed to go in and, in fact, commit this atrocity in spite of the fact that the FBI interviewed him. President of the United States, I want to know what transpired in those interviews. I think the FBI probably has a better idea than anyone else on how to move forward with that. I'll bet they've got that going right now. I would also be very transparent about this. I think people have a right to know what the government is engaged in, what steps are being taken to prevent this kind of thing. But take the situation in Nice, where a truck drives into thousands of people. That's a situation that exists in this country in probably 10,000 different places every single day. So I don't think anyone believes that someone who wants to commit suicide, someone who wants to kill themselves and commit an atrocious act by doing so, won't be able to do it and will, in fact, do that in the future.
And let me ask you one more question before I open up to a couple of my colleagues. You've now had an opportunity to watch the Republican convention and the Democratic convention. Was there an issue in both those conventions that they did not address that you believe the two parties did not address properly?
Well, really, it's a mixture of both. I mean, arguably, Democrats do well in certain categories. Arguably, Republicans do well in certain categories, but neither of them do very well in any of that. I think there's just a big 6-lane highway down the middle. Keep government out of my pocketbook. Smaller government. Keep government out of the bedroom. Marriage equality. A woman's right to choose. Legalizing marijuana, and neither party has been good either with regard to the interventions. I think most people are really skeptical, I being one of them, that these military interventions have resulted in the world being more safe as opposed to less safe. Libertarians are not isolationists. Donald Trump is an isolationist. We're non-interventionists. Let's not get involved in other countries' affairs. Let's get involved in promoting free trade, which is the opposite of crony capitalism, and let's be very, very involved when it comes to diplomacy.
Let me open up to a couple of my colleagues. Anybody have had a question here? Eliza? You shout, I'll repeat.
Right before this, and
yes.
You said that you think Mitt Romney is considering the possibility of endorsing you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, just that he made those public statements, and I view those public statements as very positive. He's going to keep his options open. Well, his option happens to be Bill Weld and myself, and I think he's also looking at the polls. And I think everybody wants to be able to hitch their wagon to a winner. If we do get to 15, which I think we will in the polls, if we are in the presidential debates, if we get to that 20% threshold, I think anything is possible.
Do you believe that you're a natural landing point for some of these never-Trump Republicans?
I believe I am a natural landing point for Democrats and Republicans. Regardless, let's say Trump gets elected, let's say Clinton gets elected. Politics in Washington are going to be more polarized than ever. What if you elect a couple of libertarians, former Republican governors that served in heavily blue states, got reelected, that are going to hire Democrats and Republicans that are libertarian leaning, and really take the position of, come on, let's come together on really issues that we need to come together on. I think under that scenario, I think people can recognize that the third option is pretty viable.
She was asking if...
we have spoken with him, and I just appreciate... I appreciate how someone who has been an elected Republican or Democrat or is elected in those positions, how difficult it is to cross over that line. So I respect that, and I respect those individuals on their own accord making those decisions.
Hi, Governor. Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You mentioned it just a moment ago, you've been a very ardent supporter of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. What do you think accounts for the real sort of bad feelings, toxic feelings among Republicans and Democrats on free trade, and how would you make the case for free trade in this environment?
Well, I think that free trade and crony capitalism have been politically identified as one and the same when they're really the opposites. And that is an issue of communication. Free trade is trade that is devoid of government interference. When government interferes, usually it alters the marketplace, and it alters the marketplace oftentimes in benefit of those that actually pay for that benefit.
And let me ask, this government interference issue interests me, particularly in the rise of, amongst the Republicans, particularly discussion about religious liberty. Not to build too simple a straw man, but as a libertarian, how do you address the issue when a religious baker, for instance, does not want to provide a cake for a gay wedding? Don't both parties there have a liberty interest that is in conflict?
All right, let's use, you're using that example. Let me use this example, that if we allowed for religious discrimination, something that is currently not allowed, I suggest to you that this country will become more discriminatory than it has ever become before. that businesses will, under the guise of religious freedom, will discriminate against Muslims. They will discriminate against classes of people that we have yet unidentified. That's how much discrimination will take place if we allow the black hole of discrimination on the basis of religion.
So at what point do you say to a religious organization, you cannot, the government is going to say, these beliefs cannot be practiced in a business context?
These acts, these discriminatory acts cannot occur in a business environment, something that is current U.S. law. This would require a change in U.S. law to allow for discrimination that, although you point out an example that is very narrowly based, could be expanded to virtually encompass everything. That at some point you will be discriminated against because a business owner will deem his religion allowing him to do that.
Fair enough. Do we have other questions from the group over here? Tremendous. Governor Johnson, very grateful for you coming to take the time.
Oh, thank you for taking your time.
We appreciate the fact that you've crashed a Democratic convention of which you are not invited.
And by the way, I'm trying to keep a very low key.
We'll tell nobody you were here.
And be very respectful. I am very respectful of Hillary Clinton winning the nomination, going to the Cleveland convention, very respectful of Donald Trump winning the convention. I just want to take him on in September on the national debate stage.
Tremendous. Well, we wish you the best of luck, sir, and thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And thanks for joining us here at USA Today's Newsmakers.